Let's move on to Blackwater. So are you familiar with Blackwater?
Oh, very much so.
So, this article from InfoWars is talking about, a lot of different aspects of where Blackwater is. The first part that I want to highlight is it says the private military company, previously known as, no one really knows how to pronounce that one, XC Services. Before that, it was Blackwater USA, and Blackwater Worldwide has changed its name several times due to public scrutiny after the company was exposed for murdering 17 innocent Iraqi civilians in Nosor Square in Baghdad in September 2007. Do you remember when this happened?
I do.
Yeah, it was.
I remember very, very well.
What was your reaction to it?
I was disgusted, but at the same time, I could understand it. Anytime you've got mercenaries, even regular soldiers, there's going to be issues. When you are working with violence and guns and fear, there are going to be issues, especially mercenaries. Mercenaries are hired guns.
Indeed.
They work for whoever pays them.
Yeah, that's true.
They're tougher because they're not idealistic. They're not fighting for a cause. Mm-hmm. They're not fighting for their lives or their homes or their country. They are fighting for money.
Yeah.
And they can change sides depending on their company.
And whether it is the U.S. Army or, mercenaries, both of them have inculcated, at least we know on the battlefields of Iraq and Afghanistan, the sort of, demonization of the very people who they are there to allegedly help, So there's almost develops this hatred. You see the whole people as your enemy.
Well, yeah, we're supposed to help them, but they're the enemy. How do we help the enemy?
Well, they're not all the enemy, is the point.
No, but I'm saying, if you look at what we've been brought up since 9/11 to think, they're the enemy.
Yeah, that's true. It's true.
Drilled into your head. They're the enemy. Kill the enemy.
Yes, you're right. They drill into their head that kind of ideology, denigrating Arabs as, Eric Prince, who's the founder of Blackwater. When he was in his younger years, he traveled the world with his father, visiting many historical sites, such as the German concentration camp Dachau. However, the most influential...
And I had family that died there, and I went there. It's not whatever. It's important.
I'm not saying it's not important. I don't know how to pronounce it. I don't speak German, so...
No, I know. It's called Dachau.
Okay. However, the most influential event he witnessed was the Rwandan genocide, in which 500,000 people were massacred by another tribe in East Africa in 1994. After that, he got a low-level internship in the White House, but he soon left to work for an ex-freedom fighter, freedom fighter, against the Soviets in Afghanistan. Prince's motivation to help save lives has ironically led him to a career of training military combatants to kill. Obviously this company is notorious. If he had these life experiences, seeing the traumatic, violent events the way he did, why would he promote more violence in his life?
Being a mercenary does not mean that you're this evil whatever person. Sometimes these mercenaries are used to protect. If you look at
you do not have to be evil. You do not have to be evil to promote violence.
Right, but I'm saying what Blackwater and other companies like that do is the fact is there are people, there are Americans that have to work in some of these countries.
So, but that doesn't answer the question. After seeing violence, why do you think he would gravitate towards a company?
Because that's what...
Blackwater's presence and the presence of other mercenaries did not prevent mass slaughter from occurring in Iraq. If anything, I think a lot of people would say it exacerbated that.
There were mercenaries that helped us win the American Revolutionary War.
I would say that, if we need to rely on mercenaries, if we don't have enough troops, then we shouldn't even be going into a country then.
You know what? That's not something I disagree with, but the fact is, we go into countries for political reasons. Whether or not we have to... Look, we should have been getting out of that area. We're a superpower. We should have been in and out of there, no problem. Mm-hmm. But we're not.
That was the plan. Do you think that these events psychologically affected Mr. Prince? to desire to build an army of his own?
I don't know if I call it an army of his own, but
well, it is an army. Well, how is it not an army?
Because an army has a political agenda. He does not have a political agenda.
Well, I would say an army is just a collection of people, with a cause, fighting for something, whether that be money or a country.
I don't agree.
Okay, let me reframe that question then. Do you think that these events psychologically affected him to make him desire to build his own fighting force?
Yes, that I would agree with, because, I think he wanted a force that he could have, so that, he could either go in to help rescue people or for people to hire.
See, you know what? The points you're making...
Because like you said, the whole thing with Rwanda, there were people that were stuck behind those lines.
Yeah.
And if, let's say I had enough money, I could hire Blackwater and say, go get my dad out. Or, my, dad being just a, whatever. Go get my person out.
The points you are making are not without merit, and I can't just dismiss them offhand, but at the same time...
I'm being devil's advocate, too.
Yeah, but at the same time, I think, it is so hard for us, especially people who know about some of these atrocities that have been committed by Blackwater soldiers, to see the benevolent mission. It's hard to believe that.
A lot of these people, these soldiers that get hired by Blackwater, when you've been a soldier, you start to develop a God complex to an extent.
Oh.
You get a lot of people that join for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
Oh, I can get a gun and go kill people. You do get a lot of people that are not psychologically balanced. I want to do X, Y, Z and get hired for this, when in reality they just want to kill people.
Yeah, so the fact that...
you do hear of the atrocities, but this was the biggest atrocity by a lot. But there are also atrocities committed by, look at Abu Ghraib, for example.
Yeah, and those were not Blackwater, that was American soldiers.
Willy-nilly, but how many people really died at Abu Ghraib that we covered up, that we don't know?
Yeah, and those were...
All we know is because there was a whistleblower.
And those were American soldiers, not mercenaries.
Oh, I think they can cover it up worse than the military. I think our military can cover it up a lot better than an organization like that.
For what reasons?
Because our government has a lot more resources to cover something up.
In terms of money?
All kinds of resources. We can bag order the press for some things. There's a lot of resources that the military has. Do I agree with what a lot of Blackwater does? Some I do, some I don't. Do I agree with their right to exist? Absolutely. Somebody I love, I would want a team like Blackwater to be able to go in and try and extract.
So do you believe that... that I have a two-pronged question here. If you believe in their right to exist, do you think that mercenaries should have a place in American military operations, one? And number two, substantial government contracts are going to these corporations. Do you think that this government money should be diverted to organizations like Blackwater? Yeah, well, I think it goes beyond that. In some ways, the lines have blurred between our military and mercenary organizations.
Absolutely, they have. Because it's an accountability thing.
Yeah, but also...
It's plausible deniability.
Yeah,
and I think... It all comes down to plausible deniability. That's always going to happen.
I don't think mercenaries are necessary, because I don't think this maintenance of empire and this intervention and invasion is necessary. But, if we're looking in the context of the upkeep of the American empire, I can say, okay, yeah, they're probably necessary. But in a moral sense, I don't think that we should be employing. I don't think taxpayer money should be going to Blackwater.
Well, it isn't. Taxpayer money isn't. It's some of the taxpayer money going to mob-owned businesses.
Hold on.
Essentially.
Hold on.
It's a matter of who bids for a contract.
Okay, but listen to me for a second. If they are if they are rewarded with a contract, okay, what money are they paid with?
Well, but, what I'm saying is they're a company like anybody else.
But it is taxpayer money.
Well, okay, I guess you can call it that, yeah.
Well, what else would it be? I mean...
General Accounting Office.
What is that?
That's the office that approves all the contracts, everything.
Okay. Many people would say, well, there has been evidence of corruption, that not necessarily these are the best bids, necessarily.
I could see that starting under the Bush administration, maybe.
Okay. Well, let's move on with more pieces of this article. So according to, it cites reporter Jeremy Scahill's report titled Blackwater's Black Ops, published in The Nation magazine in 2010. Scahill ties the private defense company's work to several multinational corporations, such as Monsanto, Chevron, Walt Disney, and the Royal Caribbean Cruise Line. Joseph Cofer Black, a former CIA official who now leads one of Blackwater's divisions, harbors a reputation of being particularly vicious. And then it talks about these corporate relations the company has that it would include intelligence services to the biotech giant Monsanto through infiltration of animal rights activists, anti-genetically modified foods activists, and other potential oppositions. Wilson says they hired the company to keep track of public disclosure of its opponents. Do you think it is right for Monsanto to target private citizens who choose to go towards activism? Just focusing on Monsanto. So you're saying that because it's so common that it's justified in doing this?
I'm not saying it's justified. I'm just saying that's what they do.
Well, I mean, that's what they do. But I mean, we're talking about. Let's go one step further. I mean, do you think that Monsanto should be allowed to do this?
Well, technically, they're not allowed. None of them are. If they get caught, they get in trouble. Just because you know something, knowing something and being able to catch it and prove it are two different things.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. So it goes on to say, this one division of Blackwater sought to become the intelligence arm of Monsanto by offering to provide operatives to infiltrate activist groups organizing against multinational biotech firms. Blackwater could have our persons actually join activist groups legally, this person said, and he acknowledged they'd be paid by Monsanto. So what can these animal rights activists do that makes Monsanto so threatened to bring in Blackwater?
I'm an animal rights activist and have been for years. I even, I did a protest, was in the, Congress. I'm very pro-animal. Those who know me know it. I rescue, I foster, some of these groups will go to a meat processing plant and put something in the, I can't remember the name of the group that did it, but they basically sabotaged the processing plant and cost, millions of dollars to this one company by destroying their equipment.
Do you think that the argument of animal rights justifies this?
Absolutely not. No matter how you feel, you work and you change the law.
Yeah.
You can't destroy that company's property.
Yeah.
I may hate what they do, but I got to find a way to do it legally.
See, I would say that if we move on from your point that there is this threat, why would you hire Blackwater? I mean, that seems like kind of like trying to shoot a squirrel with a machine gun. Isn't this wrong, though, to infiltrate these groups proactively before they even commit crimes?
No, because when you've got somebody that costs $1 million in advance,
but that's
like you said, like the article said, they infiltrate legally.
I don't think that it said legally.
That's the thing.
A few minutes ago, didn't you say that this industrial espionage is illegal?
If I want to infiltrate a group, all right, what's wrong with that? I can take money for that.
I see
there's
a lot wrong with that.
There's nothing illegal about that.
Because I think that is...
Ethically, it may be wrong, but there's nothing illegal.
I don't always see legal and moral as the same thing, and I think a lot of times they're not the same thing.
But the fact is, legal is legal. Do I find it immoral to do X, Y, Z? Sodomy. Sodomy is illegal in some places.
Indeed, and oral sex is illegal in Maryland.
And wait, and is it immoral? I don't think it's immoral.
Yeah.
But it's illegal. You see what I'm saying? Again, what we believe and this reality sometimes are different, and it's a fine line, and it sucks sometimes. But if the laws are there for a reason. If we don't abide by the laws, we have chaos.
Well,
and chaos won't suit anybody.
But let's take that example that you just used. People have been disobeying these sodomy laws, and there has not been chaos.
Because we have so many laws that they don't all get enforced.
So there's chaos because of the law, you're saying?
Catching the murderer is more important than catching the sodomite.
Yeah.
So they prioritize some of the laws. The system is flawed.
That's true.
It's critically flawed. It sucks that we can't condemn it. You know, we can condemn it personally, but that's all we can do.
Yeah. Well, okay, what would you say to somebody who, was an animal rights activist and, is saying, well, this is not fair. We are just, public citizens. We're in this group fighting for a cause. We don't have the resources Monsanto does. Why should they be allowed to infiltrate our group when they have millions of dollars more than us?
Because that's capitalism, and that's just the way it goes. To screen our people better, to who we allow with access,
Yeah, but I think that's shifting. That's shifting the blame. But looking forward in terms of solutions to this impasse, how do you think that animal rights activists can deal with this?
Crazy people who are like, we have to infiltrate and we have to be spies, and
Yeah,
and I
you're
think
right.
It damages their own credibility.
I guess I have more tolerance for these what you term stupid actions because, I see some of them as morally justified. And
what I have personal tolerance for versus what I agree with is different. And to be honest, I really think that there is such a thing as bad press, and there is such a thing as turning on.
But going back to the actions of these, like more radical groups, like I was saying, like I see them as justified because I think that they have a cause that is greater than that of the corrupt law. And the argument for that is the fact that in this country, laws are bought and purchased, by lobbyists. The law
is very true.
Inherent in the system. The law is not going to be commiserate with the aims of a group like PETA or the Animal Liberation Front. That's going to be totally against them, So
if they get enough grassroots support, if they let people know what they're doing and why they're doing it, I think it will grow and grow. Look how many animal lovers are in this country. Yeah. Look at the crazy pet products. People buy there's nail polish for dogs and, all kinds of this stuff. People love their animals. Groups love this. It's groups, and that's the thing. It's marketing. If they marketed what some of these other companies are doing in the right light, they would have no problem getting these laws passed. People would demand them along those lines.
In conclusion, so like I said, I am partial to a radical animal rights view, but at the same time, pragmatically, I completely agree the fact that while I may say, okay, I believe that action is justified, at the same time, you are absolutely right when you say that gives these companies more rhetorical weapons to say, oh, these guys are crazy. Look at this, what they did, So in a sense, you have to be smart about this.
Exactly.
Let's move on.
That's the only way to win against these big companies with the big resources. You have to play it's all a game.
Yeah, and you know what? I think there are some activists who are just so idealistic. They want to play in this sort of parallel game, but what they don't realize is, if you're fighting for something in the system of capitalism, you don't necessarily have to sell yourself out. But to get your cause advanced, you have to use those elements of capitalism that can help you for your advantage.
Exactly. Like if you know Monsanto is breaking a law, you need to advertise the hell out of that.
And use our commercial media.
You need to document it.
Yeah.
You need to document it, you need to prove it, and you need to advertise that fact and get people so angry that you can get a majority of people to say, hey, wait a minute, these guys are doing that, that's wrong. Let's talk to our congressman, let's talk to our senator, let's put a stop to it. If public opinion sways to the point where it costs them money, they'll stop.
I agree.
That's what it comes down to.
I agree. And you know what? It sucks that activists will have to play that game. And, more radical people would have to play that game. But I think that they do need to realize that. They have to come to terms with the system that they are in. But that's hard for a lot of people because they say, well, my ideals are greater. And I think I would say to them, your ideals are great. But you know what? If you don't play the game like you're saying, you're never going to be able to implement your ideals.
Right. And at the end of the day, the fact is you want it to change. At the end of the day, that's what's important. You want to affect the change.
Yes.
If you go crazy and you come off as such a crazy person that, the general public turns their back on you, there's nothing you can do. You didn't affect any change.
Yeah, it's absolutely true.
It's all the court of public opinion.
And you know what? I think that, that argument could be made for the Tea Party, that they really didn't affect as much change as they wanted to because they were so effectively either made themselves look deranged or were portrayed that way. They made it so easy.
Yeah. When they started out, I was an advocate for the Tea Party. I thought it was a great idea when they started out.
But by the time you see...
And then they went a little too far and went nuts, and I was like, let's back off these.
I mean, they're not a group that any of us would want to associate with,
Not anymore. In the beginning, though, it was great.
Yeah, I mean, but then by, a number of years or a number of months later, you had people, comparing Hitler to, Obama and, holding swastikas and really outrageous things.
Yeah, and the Tea Party really hasn't been around that much. It's only been a few years.
Yeah, it's true, but they
went from I thought, a good group to a bunch of nut jobs in a very short time.
Yeah, and I think the argument is out there. I'm not like a scholar of the Tea Party, and, I think it's so soon that we don't know all the information about it. Like, we're going to have to wait for history and posterity a little bit. But I think there's a convincing argument that it did start out as a libertarian grassroots organization. And by the time the 2010 midterms rolled around, they were a neoconservative organization bankrolled by millionaires. So, I mean, how did that happen?
Yeah. I think they sold out, to be honest.
They sold out.
Yeah, they saw the money. They saw the dollar signs, and there went the ideal.
And, they were on Fox News, and they got some candidates elected. But in the end of the day, because they they sold out so far, they didn't achieve anything. So I think what's important...
But I think PETA sold out. I think PETA sold out big time.
Yeah, so the important thing is to strike a middle ground and a balance between keeping your ideals that are original to you, foundational, and then playing the system, but not going too far to either side.
Right, and you don't go too far too fast either.
Yeah,
you have to build up slowly.
And you know what?
Established.
And the Tea Party, they did move really fast.
Oh my God, yes.
And they moved fast because they courted money and they courted media. This is a great discussion, and I enjoy this greatly. But let's continue going through this article. So. Back to Blackwater, to bring it back. On September 3rd, 2010, the New York Times published a report stating Blackwater Worldwide has created a web of more than 30 shell companies or subsidiaries, in part to obtain millions of dollars in American government contracts. Since 2001, the intelligence agency, the CIA, has awarded up to $600 million in classified contracts to Blackwater. The transactions were financed by Bank of America, and 5 former senior Blackwater executives, including its former president, were facing weapons charges. Talking in terms of the executive who's at the head of this, we were talking about him, Prince. His last name is Prince. He has since left the country and relocated to Abu Dhabi, the United Arab Emirates. One of the reasons he gave was that there are no labor unions there, but Jeremy Scahill, the reporter, said it also has no extradition treaty with the United States. Well, no, so you don't think that he would potentially...
The fact is, if you're going to do a lot of business in the Middle East, and you're going to live over there, Abu Dhabi is a pretty damn nice place to be.
Yes, but it's also a nice place...
So, it's not like he's going to move to Venezuela if he's doing business in the Middle East.
Well, Blackwater wouldn't, be welcome in Venezuela, but...
But you know what I'm saying.
I know what you're saying.
That's my point.
But I think an equally convincing argument is, it's also, Abu Dhabi is also a great place if you're running away from American law. And some of you, you ran and started a company that had major executives that are facing investigations by the State Department for weapons charges.
Because Blackwater is a black eye, and they want to bring it down.
But work with me here. So in American corporate culture, there is culpability at the top because they are responsible to shareholders. So usually who is the sacrificial lamb? The people at the top. Why is this situation different that he's able to just escape to Abu Dhabi? If this was like GE, if this was like Kraft Foods and some scandal erupted, it would be the person at the top who goes, not some, other middlemen.
Unless he potentially really didn't have any knowledge of that.
But I'm saying in a normal situation, even if these sacrificial lambs have nothing to do with it, they still get canned.
They were at the head of the subsidiary company. You can't expect the president of the guy who owned all the subsidiaries to, watch over them. That's why they are subsidiaries.
See, I have to say this. If you are running a multinational corporation that is responsible for deaths, whether they be justified or not, taking millions of taxpayer money and, basically legally trafficking in weapons, I think you need to have that accountability. I think you need to ensure that this type of stuff does not happen. And you know what? I would hold you accountable if you are fostering a culture of corruption. So I do hold, I hold those people accountable, but yeah, I hold him accountable too, and I think the law should.
Well, again, I worked at a company that had more subsidiaries and sister companies than you know what to do with. They were very large arms dealer, trafficker.
This goes to the concept of too big to fail, which usually applies to banks. But in this case, a corporation that has this much consequence and is receiving this much public money and is this consequential in American foreign policy should not be too big to hold its leader accountable.
Do I agree with you? Yeah, but the fact is, that's what happens.
Yeah, and I'm not disputing that's what happens, but I'm just saying that this is a special case because I know if this was a normal company, and by that I mean not one that's getting contracts or not one that has this mercenary army, this would not, you see every year tons of Wall Street CEOs, founders, leaders, off with their heads if a scandal comes out. This is the exception. This is getting a different situation than most companies get.
Okay, but explain to me this scandal you're referring to. There was one big incident where some people went nuts and killed people. Should be held personally accountable?
Well, let me just bring up some of the other scandals, and we can talk about them.
Okay.
So in terms of Blackwater, zooming before this incident in 2007, Blackwater was sued by the families of 4 contractors killed in Fallujah in March 2004. The families, blah, 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 blah. Then they were called to testify before the House Government Reform Committee in 2007. Two former... No, I'm not done. I'm not done.
Maybe because of negligence.
I'm not done, though.
I'm sorry. Come on now.
I'm not done yet. There is a list of these things that makes this very sketchy company. Let me continue. Okay, so two former employees claimed that Blackwater defrauded the federal government on a security contract given after Hurricane Katrina. A federal judge, blah, blah, blah. There was a civil lawsuit alleging that Blackwater defrauded the federal government of money when billing it for work in Iraq and Afghanistan. And then in terms of litigation over actions in Iraq, the Center for Constitutional Rights filed a suit against Blackwater under the Alien Tort Claims Act on behalf of injured Iraqi families, and that was during the Baghdad shootings. Then in 2009, another lawsuit was filed alleging that Blackwater employees shot and killed 3 members of an Iraqi family who were traveling from the airport to the city on July 1st, 2007.
Okay, great. I can file a lawsuit for whatever I damn feel like. That doesn't make it a righteous claim. Were there any of these cases that were actually tried, convicted? I mean, any of them?
Yes. There was a case called Helvinston et al. Versus Blackwater Security. Also, the Justice Department did bring criminal charges against 5 Blackwater employees. So many of these have reached trial.
But again, see,
and the Iraqi government expelled them.
I don't know. It's hard. It's really hard to say whether or not he should be personally accountable for these things. The president of the company?
Okay, well that's...
No.
What about all these Iraqis that have been killed?
I mean, I don't know. I am playing devil's advocate here.
Yeah.
You know, do I think that that they probably have some accountability? Absolutely. Do I know how much? No. It's kind of all up in the air, But in general, I really, I'm more agreeing. I think Blackwater has accountability. Whether he personally has accountability, I don't know.
So you
I need to learn more about each incident.
But
before I could say,
okay,
TV.
And I get that. But in an abstract situation, doesn't the founder and the leader, you have good things that come with being the leader. You get millions of dollars, but you have this downside in the fact that at the end of the day, you must take responsibility for your organization. That's like
telling, when you are that big, you cannot take personal accountability. You can't.
You know what? If your organization is that big to the fact where it's out of control of any of your executives and no one seems to be able to rein in these repeated incidents, then I think that you shouldn't be that large, or you should not be receiving taxpayer money.
What needs to happen is that the board of directors needs to oust him and get somebody in there who does know what they're doing.
Well, I believe that he should be brought to justice.
I think that's a crock of crap.
Well,
that's inflammatory.
Listen, but what am I trying to say? Say he did travel to Abu Dhabi because it was an environment of impunity where he could escape justice. Who would admit that? Of course he's going to say something else. He's the head of a corporate company.
I understand that, but I think that the only reason the journalists brought it up was to inflame the reader. What are the numbers? How many people have died?
Okay.
What are the actual numbers?
Okay. Give me 1 second. Because it was not included in this one article.
Exactly. That's what makes me curious. Infowars.com?
Well, okay. You can't say something about a website from its name. I will admit that I do get articles from InfoWars, but it is sometimes a notoriously unreliable resource. However, Jeremy Scahill is not.
Okay. Like I said, it just sounds a little off.
Well, what sounds off about it?
It was, I hate Blackwater, blah, 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 blah. If you look at the title, The Mysterious New Owner of, but yet they were trashing Prince the whole time. So the article really has nothing to do with the new owner of Blackwater worldwide. Nothing.
It's a misleading headline, but I mean, but that I don't think that invalidates the information that is in here, or the arguments presented.
I don't think this particular article was well done.
Okay. Well,
Not this particular one.
InfoWars is fairly shoddy, and I don't have the numbers about Blackwater. I'm just giving numbers.
Whoa. You know what I just realized? They took bits and pieces of Scahill's report. The headline and the article have nothing to do with each other.
So the article finishes up, it seems unlikely that multinational corporations such as Monsanto need to hire veteran war assassins to protect themselves against harmless grassroots organizations.
Veteran war assassin? Who's the war assassin? This is just an inflammatory trash, right?
People whose job it is to kill Iraqis. Well, that's what their job is. That's what their job is in practice. You're occupying this nation.
If these people really wanted to go on killing sprees, there would be a lot more dead. A lot more dead. Because these guys all have automatic weapons. They don't go around just randomly assassinating people.
And I'm not saying that either, but I think that in a larger context, this organization served in the past tense, oppress these people and, bring this almost military regime upon them.
No, I don't think so in the slightest. I think that's a little naive.
You think it's naive? I think that's realistic.
I think Blackwater's worked for places like Disney and Royal Caribbean.
Well, I'm not talking about when they're dealings with Walt Disney. I'm talking about Iraq.
I understand that, but Iraq is one little portion of what they do. They don't only work in Iraq.
Iraq is the reason...
They work in places like Mexico City where kidnappings are rampant. They work all over the world.
Iraq is the reason that any of us even know what Blackwater is. It is pivotal to understanding their role in history.
They had a bad incident in Iraq, and that's how we know what they are.
Had multiple...
And are they paying for that? Absolutely.
I think they should.
No. That's your moralistic sense. And yeah, absolutely they should suffer, but they're never going to, and that's life.
See, I would disagree with you in the sense that they never will. I think if the system under the system, they never will. But I do believe change is possible.
Right, but by the time it happens, these people will be, long past, long gone. Change is absolutely possible, but it takes time.
Well, I hope for something better than that. But I think that, I don't know. Let's go. I feel like a future is possible where these people will be held accountable. But
absolutely. In the future, absolutely.
Well, we need to wrap up this article. So that was a very vibrant conversation. I think, in summation, I think it's an example of we don't disagree on most of the reality of the situation. We're just emphasizing different points. And I think I am more idealistic. I don't think that's naive. I think people would say I'm naive, but I think I'm just holding accountable Blackwater.
No, you're very idealistic, and I totally believe, and I respect that, and that's kind of what I love about you.
Let's take a break, and then we are going to come back and finish by discussing the royal baby as media phenomenon. Who was behind this saturation of the royal baby in the world media? We will talk about that when we come back.